We're taught that a Yartziet is a time to act, because that's what the Neshama appreciates most. It's been 3 years since Levi's passing, and days don't get easier, but at the same time, every day we're grateful for all that our community has offered us in support, chizuk, and doing in Levi's memory. Especially the library here, which is definitely an outpour of friendship and care for our family and in memory of Levi. The dedication of, if I can thank personally, Bracha Kramer and Lisa Hawk for their endless days and nights in making sure that this library is a success, not only locally for our community, but beyond the community, reaching out to Chabad houses around the country, making sure that the Chabad house children have books to read and are appreciating this library. And therefore, when it comes a time to remember Levi, figured it would be best to dedicate the evening to do and to learn his memory. So we're fortunate to have tonight Rav Pinson, who I want to start by wishing him simchas only in the family. Unfortunately, just a short while ago, his mother at a very young age passed away after a lengthy illness, and I had to negotiate the evening with him because an evening of this sort is not just a speaking engagement, so to say, but it's reliving the pain and the open wounds, but recognizing that what we do for the sake of the neshama. That's what they would want. Rabbi Pinson is the rabbi of Chabad of Carroll Gardens in Brooklyn and has written 15 books on spiritual matters, mostly insights into Kabbalistic ideas and ideals. And tonight Rabbi Pinson will address us on the topic of reincarnation. You may learn who you were, who you will be. You may not want to learn, but we'll definitely hear about it. And I want to thank Rabbi Pinson, who has actually come back from Canada. He was lecturing there to be here with us this evening. And may Hashem help that we should meet on simchas, happy occasions with happy hearts.
This week's Torah portion, we read in the Torah, Ata Tetzava. And this is a very unusual portion, because this is the only portion in the Torah from the birth of Moshe till his passing that Moshe's name does not appear once in the Torah. Very unusual. And the reason that's given is because normally this parsha is read near Zion Adar, which Zion Adar is when Moshe passed away. And to recognize the absence of Moshe, his name does not appear in the Torah. But the first word in the Torah of this week's portion is Ata. Ata means you, and you is Moshe. So his name doesn't appear, but his essence appears. And this is something that we have to think about, because name represents an expression. But the essential I, which we'll talk about in terms of reincarnation, the essential self, is not just the expression of self, it's the essence of who we are. And the Ata, the essence of a person, is always there, is always present, even after physically a person passes on, and there's a hester, there's a concealment of the person's revealed self, that we no longer physically see the person. And sometimes the hester, the darkness, the hiddenness is so hidden, like we actually learned something about the Megillah, that the word Esther comes from the word Hester, that Esther's name was actually not Esther, her name was Hadassah, but she hid her name, and she hid her name in the name that was called Esther, and Esther itself means hidden, so this is a double hiding. She hid her identity, and she hid her identity in a name that actually means hiding. And the Talmud says that where do we find the word Esther in the Torah? The Talmud says, from Vanoichi Aster Hastir, from the verse that talks about double hiddenness. That sometimes things are so concealed. There are two types of secrets. There's sometimes things are concealed and you know there's some things there. There's sometimes it's so concealed that you forget that something's actually there. That's the depth of concealment. That's a very big darkness. And some people that experience the absence and the loss of somebody they loved can not only feel the absence of the person, but they start, God forbid, even forgetting them. They feel like they're forgetting. They forgot that it's actually concealed. There's a little sweet story with the son of the Maggid. The Maggid of Mezrich, who was a student of the Baal Shem Tov. When he was a little kid, he was playing hide and go seek. And he was a very clever kid, and he hid in a really good place. And a few hours later, he comes running into his father's room. His name was Avram. He comes running into his father's room, and he's crying. And his father asks him, why are you crying? He says, I was playing hide and go seek with my friends. I hid in a very good place, and no one found me. So he said, that's great. That's the object of the game. You won the game. He says, you don't understand, Father. Not only didn't they find me, but they stopped looking for me. And then when I emerged from my hiding place, I realized they were playing another game. And at this point, the Maggid himself started crying. And he said, this is the story of life. God hides from us. But the intention of the hiding, the intention of any type of hester in this world, any type of concealment, is that we should seek God. We should search. And that is one level of hiding. We know that something's hidden and we're searching to find the meaning, to find the purpose, to find Hashem in the hiding place. But then there becomes such a deep level of hiddenness that we actually forget that there's a game. We forget that there's something hidden that we have to find. The story of Esther, the story of the Megillah is Megillas Esther. The word Megillah comes from the word to reveal. Megillas Esther means legalot Esther, to reveal the concealment. To reveal the concealment means that all the darkness in our lives and all the things that conceal us from ourselves, from others, and from Hashem, and that all the hesed upon him, everything that we see in this world that seems to be hidden, our task in life is to search. And like we say in the Kaddish, what do we do when we say Kaddish? We say, Yiskadal, Yiskada Shmei Rabba. Let the great name become great. What this actually means is Shmei, the word Shmei is Shem Yudke, the name of the Yudke, which is when a person experiences concealment in his life, they're experiencing the name Elokim. Elokim is, in Hebrew, Elokim represents the God that's expressed in nature. Bereshis bar Elokim, Elokim created. The word Elokim is Elam Yud He. Elam Yud He means the silencing of the Yud and the He, which means the silencing of the expression of Hashem in this world. When we say Kaddish, we say, may the great name become revealed, and let the Yud K become unified with the Vav K, and let us see godliness in this world. So that's our task. And that's the purpose of the hiding. The purpose of the hiding is for the seeking. So we'll talk a little bit about reincarnation, but I really want to try to focus a little bit, not just on the general idea of reincarnation, but to understand a little bit what it is in terms the way the Mukabalim, the way the great Hasidic masters and the Kabbalists throughout the ages understood the process of reincarnation, how it relates specifically to a situation where a person passes on what appears to us at a very young age. And how does this work with reincarnation? So it's a heavy topic, but we're trying to understand something very, very important. Before we can venture into the concept of reincarnation, of Gilgul Neshamos, which is the reincarnation of souls, we have to define something very important, which is what is the definition of self that reincarnates? Who is the me or the you that reincarnates? And for that matter, who is the me and you that experiences the afterlife? Olam Haba, Gan Eden, paradise. What is actually experiencing it? So let's use a metaphor. Let's say you say, for example, you have this microphone. And the microphone has a physical body, and it's the microphone, and it's plugged into an outlet, and that generates electricity, and that's where it can be used. Imagine the microphone dies, which means it breaks. It's no longer functioning. And we say that this microphone has immortality, experiences an afterlife, because the plug will survive in the future. Does that make any sense? No. Because when we talk about the self experiencing Gan Eden, we cannot just be speaking about the spiritual quality of the person. Because the spiritual quality of the person is a dimension of who we are. And when we talk about Gan Eden and an afterlife journey, we have to understand that we're talking about us. That we experience Olam Hazeh, this physical world, and we, after we pass on, after 120, will experience Gan Eden. So who is we? What's the definition of self? Very simply, what makes me different than you? Or what makes one person different than the other, besides that we have different bodies? Everyone have any ideas? The soul is a very big word, but you're going to have to define it. Anyone have any idea what makes me different than you? Yeah?
The source of where our soul comes from?
That's a very big word. Before we get to souls, simply, physically, yeah?
Your consciousness, how you look at life.
Excellent. Your consciousness, the way you interpret life, right? One person, we see two experiences the same thing. One person experiences one way, the other person experiences the other way. What creates that consciousness that experiences life differently? Why? Why does one person experience it one way and the other person experience it the other way? Do you ever think about this?
Depends on the outlet that they're connected to.
That's correct. So where does the outlet come from? Experiences, choices. Anyone in the back, or you're all silent? Yeah? Challenges. Okay, so let's try to use all the words that we used. Challenges, experiences. Very, very simply. Two people are sitting and listening to this conversation we're having now. One person is understanding it one way, the other person is understanding it the other way. Or two people are experiencing something. One is interpreting it one way, the other person is interpreting it the other way. The interpretation of the events in the present is based on our past experiences. And the experiences create our personality. But there is not... You're following? Okay. But that's not the end of the story, because it's not just experiences. Because you can have two people that are born at the same moment. They have the exact same experience, but they're interpreting their experience differently. You have children, you know this. One child, the moment they're born, has an easygoing nature, and one child doesn't have an easygoing nature. So there's something that's deeper than the experiences. We'll call it, what? Techunas HaNefesh, right? Characteristics of soul, of your type. What is that? We'll call it your basic genetic patterns. Okay? One person's born with a certain genetic pattern, another person's born with another genetic pattern. They're having experiences. These experiences are creating personality. So definition of self, when we think about ourselves, who are we at every moment? We're our past experiences experiencing the present. That's who we are. You're following? Okay. But the experiences / genetics is all an expression of our soul root, which means we have a physical body, which gives us a certain genetic pattern. Because of that, we experience life a certain way. The source of that is because we all have different souls. And according to our soul, according to the tchuna, the characteristics of our soul, we're going to have the particular body that will fit the characteristics of the soul. Let's try to understand this in another way. If we are our experiences, that's the definition of ourselves, could we observe ourselves having an experience? If you're having a thought, could you watch yourself having the thought? Yeah? If you're having a feeling, could you say to yourself, I shouldn't be having this feeling? So you can observe yourself having a feeling. So if the definition of self is your experiences or your thoughts, who is the you that's observing yourself having the feeling and having the thoughts? You're following? So what we have to say is, we have to go a little bit deeper. There's one part of ourself. When we look at ourselves at a picture when we were 15 years old, or think about ourselves when we were 15, and now we're 50. We look at ourselves then, we look at ourselves now, we say, we're not the same person like we were then. What changed between 15 and 50? 35 years of experiences. That's the differences, that makes the difference between who I was then and who I am now. But when you're 105 and you look at a picture of yourself when you're 5, you have 100 years of new experiences. But there's still a you that existed when you're 1 and exists when you're 101. Which you is that? Who's the one that's having the experiences? And who's the person that's the experiences? So in the language of Kabbalah, which is based on the Medrash, it says that there are 5 levels of soul. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama collectively are called Naran. That is the experiences. You have functional experiences, emotional experiences, and intellectual experiences. That's the definition of self that's constantly changing. You're 5, you have more experience now, you're 10, you're 15, and every day you're living, every moment you're alive, your self is constantly evolving. That's your nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Your chaya, which is your life force, is the observer of the experiences, is the thinker of the thoughts. No, I'm fine. Is the experiencer, and the experience itself is Naran. These levels of Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, which is the experiences of life, which constantly evolve, we're going to term this and say this is your autobiographical self. Okay? This is your self that when you're 10 is one person, when you're 20 is another person, when you're 30 is another person. That's why when you're 30, you look back at the things that you did when you were 15, you say, that's very strange, I shouldn't have done those things. But when you did them, you thought that was the correct move. And then you got a little older, and you look back at things that you did when you're 30, and you say you shouldn't have done them. Hopefully, if you're growing. Because your self is constantly evolving. That entirety of self, where does that exist? Which part of yourself, in which part of your body does your self exist? What's that? What did someone say? What? The Moach. Correct. If someone, God forbid, or for some strange reason, decides to exchange their arm with someone else's arm, they have a transplant, one person takes the other arm, the other person takes his arm. You're not going to become them. The only part of the body that if you actually exchange with somebody else, you'll actually become them, is the brain. Because the brain contains the memory, and the definition of self is our past experiences, which is maintained in the memory. So every moment that we're alive, it's our past experiencing the present. If we exchange our past with someone else's past, we become the other person. Is it clear? Yeah? Okay. Pretty clear? Not clear at all? We'll just get to some point, and we'll take a little question. But I just want to try to get to something very important. Because when we talk about an afterlife, that an neshama survives, we're not talking about this the plug that survives. We're talking about that you completely survive. And the way we're going to understand it soon, nothing actually changes at death. A person's here and is no longer physically here, their entirety still exists. Just like their entirety exists before they passed on in the physical form. And they were not their body. The body was the tool was the vehicle through which created new experiences, but themselves was not the body itself, the same way we'll understand that once the body is no longer, the full presence of the person is still around. And this is the way neshama can survive. Let's think about this a little bit deeper. If we say that we are ourselves at every moment, our past experiencing the present, the past has created a memory, how come we don't remember everything that happened to us? Or better yet, I guarantee you the person that you're sitting next to right this evening, and this is a person that you know very well maybe, after I finish speaking, one person is going to say, I remember one thing, another person is going to say they remember the other thing. This always happens, right? You meet somebody, you talk to them, you speak some conversation with somebody, two people are having a conversation, you say you remember one thing, the other person says they remember something else. Why? What happens? Because every person has a narrative, a story, which is created through their experiences. One person is a writer, one person is a musician, one person is a rabbi, one person is a teacher. Every person has their story. When you experience things in life, what the brain does is it's a jamming system. It says, this information I need, because this is important for my own survival. This information I don't need. So therefore it just forgets it. But you did experience it. So what part of you retains everything? If the brain is shutting down and not allowing all this information to come through, what part of the self actually retains all the experiences that we have? Which means every thought we had, every word we spoke, every action we did is forever imprinted in this reality. You call it your subconscious, we're going to call it your nefesh, ruach, and neshama. That's where your self survives. Imagine, just to use an image, imagine there's a book. In the beginning of life, it's an empty book. There's pages, but there's nothing written. Every experience that you have in life, every thought you have, every word you speak, every experience that you have, you're writing on that book. Your self, the way you're going to define yourself is by that story that you're writing. Those are your experiences. But that story is being written on a backdrop. The backdrop, that's your nefesh, ruach, and neshama. That's why when the brain shuts down, this even happens to some people that go through a near-death experience, if it's actually a real experience. As the brain shuts down, not only do people forget things, but they actually remember things. Because as the physical brain, which is the jamming system, your ego is shutting down, more of yourself becomes revealed. Until the brain completely shuts down and the entirety of a person becomes revealed. Every single thought, every single word, every single action that we have ever done becomes revealed at the moment that a person passes on. So their full self survives, full memory. And the only difference that occurs between a person 101, let's say 120, before he passes on, the moment before and the moment he passes on, the only difference is that the moment before he can gain new experiences. And the moment they pass on, they don't have any new experiences. But the full self survived because it never was the body, and it never was stored in the body. The body was just the instrument that allowed for new information, for the growth of the personality. But the person, the entirety, the whole neshama, when we talk about the neshama, we're not just talking about the spiritual spark of a person. We're talking about the person who you knew. That whole being survives fully. All their memory, every thought, word, and action the person did, their entirety survives. This is the level of nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Now I want to try to venture into a little bit another topic, and we'll get back to this. Let's understand how this works in terms of Gilgul Neshamos, of reincarnation of souls. So according to the Arizal, the Ari explains that if we look at the beginning of the Torah, when the Torah describes the creation of Adam and Eve, if you notice that there is a creation of Adam and Eve in chapter 1 and a creation of Adam and Eve in chapter 2. Adam and Chava are created in chapter 1 and Adam and Chava are created in chapter 2. In chapter 1, Adam and Chava are created simultaneously. Zachar v'nekeva bara Yisrael, male and female. In chapter 2, in Perek Beis, first is Adam and then is Chava. But chapter 1 represents Adam and Chava before the Chet Eitz Hadas. It represents Adam and Eve before the eating from the tree of knowledge, which means that they still existed in the reality of the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life. Chapter 2 is already after the Chet Eitz Hadas, after eating from the tree of knowledge, and they're no longer in the reality of the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life. Let me try to give you some type of an understanding of this. Adam and Chava before the Chet is called Adam Kadmon, primordial being. We know, the Talmud speaks about this as well, that there is 248 body parts and 365 main veins and arteries. They correspond to the 248 positive mitzvot essay, and the 365 negative mitzvahs which we're supposed to refrain from. That collectively is Taryag, the 613, which is a reflection of the body. That the mitzvahs actually reflect the body. The Arizal says, what this actually means is that imagine, we have to understand this in terms of a metaphor, not literal, but imagine there was someone standing right next to me. A being. We're going to call this Adam Chava. Adam Kadmon is standing right next to me. This Adam and Chava has 613 sparks. Those are going to be the root souls, 613. Just like the different parts of the body, there are 613 dimensions to this Adam and Chava. Adam and Chava before the Chet, before the eating of the tree of knowledge, is one. I'll explain what that means. After they ate from the tree of knowledge, they became two, and then they splintered into 613 and 613 to 613, and we have thousands of souls. Adam and Chava, in some of the images that the sages or Chazal tell us about Adam and Chava, is that Adam and Chava, before they ate from the tree of knowledge, their bodies stretched from one end of the universe to the other. Or sometimes Chazal talk about that all their hands, their fingers of the hands, were all attached as one. What is the depth of this idea? The depth of the idea is that Adam and Chava before the Chet identified themselves with the tree of life. What is the tree of life? The tree of life is the tree of unity. One. Hashem, one. Only one. What is the tree of knowledge? The tree of knowledge, according to the deeper readings, is that the tree of knowledge, every tree has both a tree of life reality and a tree of knowledge reality. The moment Adam and Chava ate from something over something else, they made a choice, I want that and not that. That's the moment they entered into the world of the Chet Eitz Hadas, because it was a place of duality, of separation. The moment they chose one over the other, that's the moment they entered into the world of separation. And now this great structure of Adam and Chava became pixelated into hundreds of different shards of souls, sparks. So imagine this being standing right next to me, and all of a sudden it falls. That's what the Talmud says also. The Gemara says that he shrunk. Shrunk means that his body shrinks and becomes little tiny pieces. Every soul that will be born, which means every person will be born, will receive a soul from one of those pieces. And our task is to recreate Adam Kadmon. It's basically like a puzzle. Every person is giving a part of the puzzle. That's your neshama. That's your specific neshama. You're meant to live a certain life. And when you live your life to its full maximum, your neshama will return back into Adam Kadmon, and it'll become part of the puzzle again. When we all collectively do our task, and we all reach our maximum soul potential, all our souls will return back into Adam Kadmon, and Adam Kadmon will become one again, and that's the era of Mashiach. That's the game. It's one, it was broken down into many pieces, and we have to take each individual soul and return it into its perfect state. How do we do that? It's very simple. Every person, like we discussed before, every single person is unique. The uniqueness of a human being, of every single person, is that we all have certain experiences. This is predicated on the tchunas hanefesh, on the qualities of our soul, which is an expression of the spiritual qualities of our spark of soul that comes from Adam Kadmon, from the great soul of Adam. Let me give you a very generic but simple example. Imagine person number one is going to be born. We're going to call this person Chaim. Okay? Chaim is just conceived. Chaim receives a soul from the right hand of Adam. Right? Remember, there was a great soul in different parts. It broke into many different shards. One soul, that's one part of the puzzle, from the right hand of Adam became the soul of Chaim. What that means is, because the right side, I'm just giving a generic example, because the right side represents chesed and giving, his soul will enter into a body that will also have the tchunas hanefesh, the qualities, the genetic pattern that will allow him to articulate kindness. That will be his sole purpose. He'll have a general tikkun, a general idea why his soul came out of this world, but specifically, his soul came down to this world to express chesed. That's why he's here in this world. So therefore, his genetics will work consistent with the soul type. His environment, his culture, his parents, everyone will raise him in a way of chesed, and he'll have the opportunity to bring out chesed. Just like there's a positive quality that Rizal says, there's also something that's negative. This Chaim will struggle with the opposite of chesed, which means he has no boundaries, no discipline, and his part of his sole purpose is to become disciplined and to have order in his life. So he has to express chesed and overcome his lack of discipline. This is very generic, you understanding? This is what his purpose becomes. Because this is his individual purpose, this Chaim will enter into a family unit that will also allow him to articulate chesed. So the father will be a person of chesed, the mother will be a person of chesed, the brothers will be the sisters, or wherever the siblings, wherever that whole family unit would all allow this kid to express himself fully. I don't know what that is, but so this is what this soul comes down to this world, and it comes down to articulate this. And every single person in this room has a very, very distinct tikkun, a distinct purpose why we came down to this world. Yes, we all have to keep the 613 mitzvahs, and we have to do everything that it says. That's correct. But there's one mitzvah that is Zohar Tzvei. There's one mitzvah that each individual person finds a special connection with. That particular good thing that we find a special connection with, that is the mitzvah that we're here to fully articulate. That's our sole purpose. And some people it takes 70 years, 60 years, 90 years, 100 years. And we're articulating and revealing our soul type. This is the general course of the Gilgul. So who survives after a person passes on? The totality of the self survives. All our memory and all our experiences. And that's all imprinted on the fabric of our neshama, which is that specific part that comes from the great soul of Adam, of Adam Rishon. And after we pass on, after 120, our neshama, which now is not just potential, but now has all our experience that we had, every thought, word, and action that we experienced in this world, will then return and become part of Adam Kadmon. And that's why the Zohar says that one of the greatest pleasures for neshama after it passes on is to connect with its parents and grandparents and people that it loved on this physical plane and they're no longer alive, because they're going back to their original place. All those souls come from the same area because they're all working on chesed, which means in the metaphor that we gave, in the example that we gave, they're all connected with the right hand of Adam. So all these souls, father, mother, sister, brother, all souls that are connected to that area, therefore they have sheer genetics, they share expression, and therefore after 120, the souls reconnect and we come back to their place. Then there's a very unusual form of Gilgul, where the purpose of this neshama coming down to this world is actually not for its own self. Up until this point, the reason why this neshama came down to this world, it's a distinct part within the great soul of Adam. It comes down into this body, we articulate fully our character, we develop ourselves, it takes us 50, 100, 120 years, we reach its point, and then we return our neshama back to its source. Since there are souls on a physical plane that are connected, we know that everything that occurs on a physical realm is true because it occurs also on a spiritual realm. The reason why people are physically connected and related or even know each other is because spiritually they share a common root soul. Their shayrish and neshama, the source of their soul, is connected, and therefore they share a common purpose. They're all here to do something together. It's not only about themselves, but all the people in your family are all here to do something together. And even according to the grandfather of the Chidah, he writes, even you choose your parents. And you choose the family, so if you have problems with your parents or something, she says, no, you chose your parents. You came down to this world to be with these people because that's the way you reach your soul maximum potential in this body. There are souls that are already been worked out, meaning these are souls that are perfect. Every reincarnation, every Gilgul, another aspect of the soul becomes revealed. So we said chesed in one life, that's one life. Then these 5 souls move down to another body, to another family, and now instead of expressing chesed, they have to express gevura, strength. And the next life, tiferes. We're just giving an example, but there's every subsequent life, these groups of souls will generally tend to come down together, and they'll all be working on perfecting and elevating and achieving and articulating their soul type. After a person passes on, the entirety of the self, which is your full memory and who you are, that self returns and goes back to Adam Kadmon. That actually doesn't come down in a reincarnation. The aspects that come down to reincarnation is the parts of the soul that were never tapped into. So person number 1, we said Chaim. He worked on chesed. His whole family worked on chesed. That's the backdrop of his story. That story is now printed and published in Adam Kadmon. And it survives. It's a Gan Eden. What comes back to this world is the other aspects of the soul. There's 613 dimensions. The other aspects of the neshama that weren't yet developed now come down to a new family group, and they're working on achieving its tikkun. And then the 3rd life and the 4th life. It's possible for a soul to come down to this world that is essentially a tzaddik. What does it mean it's a tzaddik? The soul is already perfect. And it doesn't have to come down to this world. Because chesed, it worked on chesed. Gvura, it worked on gvura. So why does it come down to this world? Sometimes souls come down to this world not for their own purpose, not to achieve anything, and not to achieve their full soul articulation. The only reason why these souls come down to this world is to actually help other people. Help other people that they will connect with in this physical world. These are very selfless souls. These are neshamas of tzaddikim, souls of tzaddikim. They don't come down to this world to achieve 100 years of greatness, and maybe not even 70 years of greatness. They live short lives, but their impact is very deep and very real. And we have to look at them as not someone that had a short life, but actually someone that had a long life. Because really, they shouldn't have been here at all. And these are souls that shouldn't have been present in this world, because they're tzaddikim. They don't have to come to this world. There's nothing to work on. The only reason why these neshamas come down to this world is to help everyone around them. Their families, their community, and the people that they had an effect on and they had a contact with. On a physical world, on a physical level, these are the neshamas that have that effect. But they're not here for their own purpose. This is a very unusual form of Gilgul. That's why the word Gilgul is also from the word chesed. Has the same numeric value. Which is a chesed. This is a very kindness. This is a big kindness from Hashem. That He brings down some souls like this to help other people. It's a tremendous self-sacrifice on the part of the soul, because the soul doesn't need to come down here. And it only comes down here to help others. This is it's a very nice thing to say. It's a very hard thing to understand. And certainly it's a harder thing to live. We talked about the hester, the concealment. The concealment occurs because we don't see everything. And we only see darkness sometimes. The Baal Shem Tov teaches that everything can be experienced on 3 levels. Oilamos, Malachim, and Elikus. Oilamos is worlds, angels, and godliness. Every experience that we have in life, we can see it for what it is. It's physical. It's world. The root of the word olam comes from helam, concealment. You can see what it is. This is what it is. The person's here, the person's not here, and you feel the pain.